Hey guys, it's Jayden Clark here from Jazz Lesson Videos, and today we'll be diving into the world of pentatonics. The pentatonic scale is the most versatile scale in all of music and can be utilized in many different ways, both inside and outside of harmony. However, the pentatonic scale can be a bit of a mystery when it comes to a jazz setting. Unlike many pop and funk applications, we often can't just take one single pentatonic scale and shred over moving harmony in a great American songbook tune. So, what can we do to apply the scale more appropriately? Well, I'm going to show you 3 different ways we can approach harmony when using the pentatonic scale. These rules will demystify the pentatonic scale over jazz standards, as well as allow us to better use it for tension and release. The etudes we are going to check out and more can be found in the 30 pentatonic etudes PDF package, where you can find a range of melodic inside etudes as well as more out-sounding pentatonic shifting etudes. To download this resource along with Chad Albie's recordings of the etudes themselves and backing tracks, feel free to click the link below. Okay, so before we dive into any etudes, it's important to recap or perhaps give an overview of the pentatonic scales that we may use. So first, let's go ahead and start off with the major pentatonic scale. Now, the major pentatonic scale consists of the 1, the 2, the 3, the 5, and the 6. Now, this is considered a very inside sound over a major chord, and of course works over a major 7 chord, but do note, without that major 7 there, the sound can be a little ambiguous, so it's more well suited for something like a major 6 or just a 6 chord. Here is what the major pentatonic scale sounds like. Okay, next, the most common of the pentatonic scales is our minor pentatonic scale. This is one that pretty much everyone that's listened to any music has heard. So our minor pentatonic scale consists of the 1, the flat 3, the 4, the 5, and the flat 7. Of course, the minor pentatonic works best over a minor 7 chord, but it could also work over a dominant 7 chord. Of course, one of the many applications is over a 12-bar blues, in which you can use the minor pentatonic scale over the whole form. The minor pentatonic scale sounds like this. Okay, and a slightly more uncommon pentatonic scale that we are going to cover is the dominant pentatonic scale. This is often one that players may not recognize straight away. Now, the dominant pentatonic scale is exactly the same as the major pentatonic scale, except instead of there being a 6, there is a minor 7. So the scale degrees as follows: a 1, 2, 3, 5, and then minor 7. The dominant pentatonic scale sounds like this. Now, with these pentatonic scales, when you go to improvise using them, it is often going to be the case that you're not just going to play them straight up and down. You are going to maneuver the scale degrees around a little bit. Now, the best way to break that down is with what I like to call skips and steps. So a step is when you step up or down between a scale degree in the pentatonic scale. And a skip is when you skip up or down between scale degrees in the pentatonic scale. The skip is when you literally skip a scale degree. So an example of that, in a minor pentatonic scale, if I'm going from the 1 to the 4, well, I'm skipping that minor third to get to the 4. Now, conversely, when I'm stepping, well, going from 1 to that flat 3, even though that's a minor third interval, it's still a step in the minor pentatonic scale. Now, the reason I mention that is because in order to make our lines more interesting using the pentatonic scale, we should incorporate different combinations of these skips and steps. Now there's a couple of other sounds I would like to highlight, and the first one is playing a minor pentatonic scale over a major chord. So we can do this by taking the minor pentatonic scale that starts a major third up from the major 7 chord. Now over C major 7, that's going to sound a little bit like this. So notice there I am using the E minor pentatonic scale to play over the C major 7. Of course, last but not least is pentatonic shifting. Now, we're going to see a little bit of this when we dive into a pentatonic shifting etude, but what you need to remember with this is you can shift by both half steps and by common tones. And it's something that we can dive a little deeper into when we cover that etude. Okay, so let's jump into the first etude. Now this, of course, is going to be a inside etude over all of me. So let's go ahead, take a listen, and then we can break this down line by line. Now just one quick note before I go ahead and play this etude. What we need to remember with this inside etude is, unless otherwise stated, the etude is using the pentatonic scale that corresponds directly with the root note and the chord quality. So that means if there is a C major 7 as the chord, unless stated otherwise, that means I'm going to be playing a C major pentatonic. This is also the case if it was a C dominant chord, I'd be playing C dominant pentatonic, or a C minor 7 chord, I'd be playing a C minor pentatonic. So it's important to note when analyzing these etudes. So here is what the melodic inside etude sounds like. Okay, so breaking this etude down now, of course, we can see that we start with C major pentatonic in the first couple of bars, followed by our E dominant 7 pentatonic in the next couple of bars. Also notice that these two little fragments of the etude, they're relatively stepwise. Of course, there's a few skips there, but generally we are using mostly stepwise motion to construct those lines. Okay, I'm going to skip the next line and move down to the third line where the E7 starts. Of course, we are still using that E dominant pentatonic, and of course we resolve into that A minor pentatonic, and that's where you can see a little more skips and steps being thrown in. Okay, getting to a much more interesting line, this fourth line here, starting on the D7. We've got this intricate triplet rhythm, and again you can see a little more skips and steps being used there, and then of course we move into that 2-5-1 back into the C, but you can still see how those pentatonic scales are able to clearly outline moving harmony, even moving harmony back to the 1. Okay, moving down to line number 6 with this A7. Of course, we're still using our A dominant 7 pentatonic before moving into our D minor pentatonic. And you can see, once again, we have got a little more intricacy when it comes to the skips and steps. We've got the third, and then we skip all the way down to that 5th followed by the 7th, and then we skip the root again, back up to the 3rd. Okay, it's a really, really hip little melodic cell there, and then of course we move into that ascending line before it changes directions in that final bar of that line just there. Okay, moving on to the final 2 lines of this etude here, the line starting with F major 7. I want us to cast our eyes to the C major 7. Of course, over that C major 7 chord, you can see that E minor pentatonic scale being utilized. This, of course, is the minor pentatonic scale starting a major 3rd up. Of course, as you can see on the page, here we highlight the major 7 with this particular sound, as well as the 9th and the 5th. You've also got the 3rd in there as well. It's just a nice sound to change things up a little bit, add a little more color, while still getting the benefit of those skips and steps that a pentatonic scale or a pentatonic scale line has. Okay, moving on to the final line here. Of course, this is that line starting on the D minor 7. Of course, we've got a little more moving harmony here, but nevertheless still keeping it quite inside. Notice that over that E flat diminished 7 chord, we're just using the diminished 7 arpeggio before resolving to the C major 7 again. You can see that minor pentatonic, a major 3rd up over the C major 7 chord. Once again, just coloring it and of course making it nice and resolved at the end of this particular etude. Remember that you can find melodic etudes like this one and more in the 30 pentatonic etudes PDF package, and having a resource like this will allow you to explore the tension and release the pentatonic scale can provide over a standard. Now, speaking of tension and release, this resource also features different pentatonic shifting etudes, and we're going to check one of them out right now. Okay, so before we take a listen to this pentatonic shifting etude, you may remember that I mentioned in the beginning, you can shift pentatonic scales with 2 different methods. That being by half step or by using a common tone. So that begs the question, what is a common tone? Well, a common tone is a note that 2 scales both share. It is a note in common between 2 scales. So in the case of our pentatonic scales, you could take G minor pentatonic and E minor pentatonic. Well, an easy common tone between those 2 is the G, right? Because the G is the root note of the G minor pentatonic, and it is also the minor 3rd of the E minor pentatonic scale. So this makes G a good note to use to shift between those 2 pentatonic scales smoothly. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a listen to All of Me, the pentatonic shifting etude. Okay, diving straight into this here, you can see on the first line we have all inside lines, and of course we are using mostly stepwise motion. So let's go ahead and take a look at the second line then. We can actually see some pentatonic shifting. So notice in the first measure we've got A minor 7 over A7. Now we're not actually creating that much tension with a sound like this. And of course you remember in the overview I said you can actually use the minor pentatonic scale over a dominant 7 chord, and it's actually going to sound okay, right? The only clash is going to be between the minor 3rd and the major 3rd, but that tends to work okay. That's actually relatively easy on the ears. Now, where we get really tense is where we are using the E flat minor pentatonic scale over the A dominant 7. Of course, the reason for this is because we don't have as many notes in common, and that allows for that tension to really ring out. Also notice that we resolve by half step to the 5th of the D minor 7 chord before playing D minor pentatonic scale. Let's jump down to the 3rd line now over the E7. We can see some more pentatonic shifting. Here you can see F minor pentatonic over E7, and then it shifts into that D minor pentatonic over E7. So to get to the F minor pentatonic, I'm thinking of that as a half step movement, okay? Because from E7 to F, or E to F, we are moving a half step. So even though we have a pretty big jump between that B and that F at the start of measure 2, we're still able to move a half step, right? We're able to step a half step outside of the harmony smoothly. Okay, so from that F minor pentatonic, okay, because we are out by a half step, that is one of the most tense sounds we can use because there are no notes in common. From this F minor, we are then able to shift up by a half step from that A flat to A. So the movement of that shift is by a half step, and we can shift into D minor pentatonic, which is not as tense. It's still kind of tense, but it's not as tense. And then we're able to resolve by a half step to that A minor 7 in the next measure, as you can see there. Okay, moving down to line 4, we've got some more pentatonic shifting. Of course, over that D7 chord, you can see we have B flat minor, and from the previous measure, once again, you can see it shifting by a half step. From that B flat minor, then we're once again able to shift by a half step into the F sharp minor pentatonic. Of course, note that we are shifting on a C, which is not really in the B flat minor pentatonic, but of course it's still highlighting that sound, allowing us to shift there by a half step. From that F sharp minor pentatonic, we are then able to shift into that B minor pentatonic, which highlights a lot more of that inside sound. It highlights a lot more of that D7, so we can use that as our release. Okay, looking towards the end of that line in the 4th measure over the G7, we can see we are using that E dominant pentatonic as well as the F sharp minor pentatonic. Again, these are all very, very out sounds. These are tense sounds before we are then able to resolve once again by half step to the C major 7. Okay, so just jumping into the second half of this etude now, cast your eyes to the E7 chord. Okay, this is on the 5th line here. We can see we've got our F minor pentatonic to C minor pentatonic to E minor pentatonic, and then on the next line we've got to E flat minor pentatonic as well. So we've got a whole array of different pentatonic sounds over just 1-2 chords. Now, I'm not going to go over every single shift individually, but hopefully this gives you an idea as to how far out you can go with this pentatonic shifting concept, but that you can also sprinkle little bits of tension in there as well. Now, I say little bits of tension, I say that because the E minor pentatonic actually works pretty well over the A dominant 7 chord, okay, because there are a lot of notes in common. Now, of course, this then shifts down a half step to that E flat minor pentatonic scale, and this gets way outside once again before resolving to that D minor 7. Okay, so moving on to the last couple of lines here of this etude, we are starting off with that D minor pentatonic scale over the F major 7 chord, and this once again is a much more inside sound. This is before moving on to an E flat minor pentatonic scale, and this is over the F minor 7 chord. This resolves nicely to the E minor pentatonic scale over the C major 7 chord, and of course that is a sound that we saw in the melodic etude, the inside etude. Okay, the last couple of shifts in this particular etude, we can see that D flat dominant 7 pentatonic over the A7, that's wildly outside, but of course this would usually resolve to a half step in the D minor 7 chord, which is at the start of the last line, but instead we are surprised with a shift to E flat minor pentatonic, which of course is a half step up from where you would usually be resolving. So hopefully we get an idea as to the different possibilities we have using these pentatonic scales. By using the pentatonic scale to highlight harmony over jazz standards, we are granted access to a variety of different ways to add tension and release. We know that we can always use the pentatonic scale that corresponds with a chord's root note and chord quality, but we now also know that we can use the minor pentatonic scale, a major third up from a major chord, to add more color. We can even add more tension when we use pentatonic shifting. To dive even deeper into these sounds, be sure to click the link below to download the 30 Pentatonic Etudes PDF package. Now be sure to click the like, the subscribe, and the bell button so you always know when we're releasing new content. As always, feel free to let us know what you would like us to dive into next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.